Buddy. This is a bit of a random video for me. So recently, I'm getting into uh, essentially doing something with like pastries and all that stuff. And so I needed something that would create a superior icing with an amazing mouthfeel. Now, I've been a little disappointed with American buttercream, and some people use half shortening, half buttercream. However, there are recipes out there that utilize something called high ratio shortening. Now, Sweetex is the Rolls Royce, okay? It's the Rolls Royce of high ratio shortening. And everyone on cake forums and all these people who are serious about it recommend Sweetex. However, it's impossible to find and it's super expensive. But what's really not answered is the difference between these two products you see in front of me, cake and icing shortening, and finally the finest high ratio icing shortening. What? That's confusing, but you can see the box looks a little different, right? And you can see that there's a different number here. So I called Stratus Foods. They did. It was hard to reach them, first of all, but when I did kind of grill them on what the differences here are, and they weren't entirely sure. In a sense, they know chemically what the difference is. The difference being the cake and icing shortening has this for the ingredients. And just the icing shortening has this for the ingredients with one difference, polysorbate 60. Now, polysorbate 60 is usually used to increase the melting point of things, and it's also an emulsifier. So, theoretically speaking, the one that says icing shortening should have a superior mouthfeel than the one that says cake and icing shortening, even though you can technically use that for icing as well. But the biggest addition, I think, is the emulsifying properties of this one. And by the way, the one on the left is more expensive and in demand than the one on the right. So that's interesting. And when I Googled it, only, there are people wondering what the difference is, but nobody really knows. So what I'm going to do, I was going to use a fancy camera or whatever, but I'm just making this video straight to the damn point. I'm going to make icings with this and this using the same recipe. I'm going to tell you which one is better. And realistically, if you're going to use one for cakes, it will 100% have to be this 268 one. You cannot, I imagine, or you don't want to really use this one for cakes because it's also more expensive. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to use it because it has polysorbate 60, which is an emulsifier that should technically help hold more liquids. Logically, that's what I would think. But apparently, they don't advertise it as a cake shortening. They advertise this as the cake shortening. So, interesting stuff. I think the consensus is trusting Stratus, and when they say one is specifically for cake and icing, one is just for icing. And one is more expensive, this one. And less available as well as this one. This one is more available, apparently. But either way, both Sweetexes are hard to find. This video is showing 50-pound boxes of each. That's right. 100 pounds for you guys to figure this out once and for all, because nobody seems to really know. Or I don't think anybody really even knows that there's two, right? They're very close in what they're saying. Hey, welcome back. Here I have my weighing scale, and I am doing a test to kind of explain how I did it, and you can maybe tell me scientifically I was wrong, though I don't think I was. I used two different measuring spoons for each of these. The recipe I'm using is Sugar Shack's buttercream. That's a recipe that calls for equal parts powdered sugar to essentially pounds of powdered sugar to literally cups of the Sweetex. So these ones each use separate measuring containers so that their ingredients didn't affect each other and we didn't get some weird mishmash. Different utensils were used to scoop each one, and gloves were used as well. So with that being said, obviously I hate that the fact that the recipe is in cups. So we went ahead and ensured that it was, well, we, by we I mean me, I made sure, what is a cup of Sweetex? And, you know, look at how sort of, you can kind of see how plasticized this is. It is hard. It is hard to get this into a cup because then what happens is you get air pockets. So it's a really annoying recipe, but I've standardized it to grams. So 1 cup of each of these, whether it's, this is icing only, this is cake and icing. So this is finest high ratio icing. This is cake and icing, the cheaper one, more expensive one. So 1 cup of either of these is equal to exactly 187 grams, which means half of these is roughly equal to 93.5 grams. As you can see here, I'm using half. So basically I'm using half a cup of each, aka 93.5 and 93.5. aka also I know that I have essentially half a pound of sugar there. So remember, the recipe is 1 pound to 1 cup to 1 cup. So half a pound to half a cup to half a cup. What does that mean? Yeah, so 93.5, 93.5. Now, I'm going to test these. I'm also going to heat test them, sous vide mode. And this is going to be heat tested, meaning we're going to get heat from the top and the bottom. So I set it to roughly, I set it to sous vide mode, and it's being set to 83, so it would hold it to 83, whatever. What do we set it to? 84. So now that I have these ready, I'm going to follow that recipe with approximately this, and I'm going to report my results and what I find. We will be flavoring this with a gorgeous orange extract, just pure orange buttercream. No, that's nasty. We're going to be using cookie vanilla. We could use a touch of orange or something to get like a, well, an almond would be wedding bouquet, I believe, but I'm not a baker, so don't rest on my laurels about extract knowledge. But this will help determine the scientific properties of both of these. Here is the high ratio icing shortening after it was beaten with nearly the full amount. You'll have your traditional, so basically this was filled to roughly 250 like the other one, weighed and scaled, and then they were worked in. I had to add a lot more flavoring, I believe, but I'm not really a buttercream guy, but this is a buttercream test. You can see the icing is smooth, and did add warm water. They'd recommend with a little creamer to make it a little more rich, but kept it pure because creamers sometimes have extra stabilizers that can affect the properties of these things. So, but then you can kind of see what we got in terms of the peaks there. In terms of, come on, there we go, in terms of the peak on the frosting there. Now, tasting it, the ratio is pretty, it's not gritty, but I do suspect if you use a different type of shortening that doesn't emulsify the sugar as well, it might taste gritty. I'm gonna add some of this warm water here. Roughly 6 grams actually. And go ahead and beat this. Just make sure. Alright, so here's the cake and icing shortening compared side by side. They do look pretty similar. And good news is they taste similar as well. I got these both to a consistency I'm happy with. See that? Kind of just holds like good form. Let's hope my camera gets it. There we go. It like reacts to the finger the same way. This one might look a little smoother because I just smoothed it. But smoothness wise, icing only. High ratio cake and icing only. Might seem like this isn't as good, but no, they're the same currently. So that's a question answered. There's really no real, let's see, this is the icing only. Wow, that's really good. Icing and cake shortening. Let me add a little more water to this. Okay. This one was a little stiffer. So I added the same, I think it was 20 grams of water actually. Now, okay. I feel this one is a little stiffer on the tongue than that one. I keep having to add, I think I'm adding too much water to this at this point. Okay, so I'm almost certain that the one on the right versus the icing only one is a little wetter now. And yet, it's so subtle. Even though it's smooth on the mouth, like, it's still good icing. I'm just having to try a shitload of this. Besides the flavor, I might have gotten the vanilla a little more better on this one, but if you have it side by side, it's a very minor difference, but the icing only one feels a little smoother. Now the powdered sugar was measured exactly, and the only real difference is the water. Now this one has more water now, see? This one has more water than this one. You can clearly see that's stiffer versus both good icings. There's something about the icing only makes it coat the tongue nicer. If I had to guess, I would say the polysorbate 80 provides a more pleasing mouthfeel. It's subtle. You wouldn't really know if you had, unless you had these side by side. But either works for a really good frosting. My preference would be for the icing only, no question. It would make sense why it's more expensive. It's not just about polysorbate 80 making it a more stable product. I do believe that polysorbate 80 allows an emulsification of the shortening across, and the sugar in the shortening. It's allowing it to intersperse that sugar more, so it just feels smoother, even though I'm adding a lot more water to this guy on the right. But I remember I was adding water to this to get a more like luxurious feeling for this, but it just got a little wetter, which is funny. It should not, however, affect the melting properties of these. I don't believe it's that out of range where I added too much water and then it will just leak out water. I think it's either these are high ratio shortenings, they should emulsify water really well, and the stability should not be impacted. So now here we got 84.4. Now that I gave a taste test, and really I was looking for texture, I prefer the icing only, without question. I kept having to add water to this. Okay, one last test for the road. It's good. Oh, man, that's way better though. Coats the tongue nicer too. I'd be curious if I wetted it more, so I'm going to take a bit and try wetting it to this consistency, seeing what we get. Okay, left as icing only. It's been watered down a lot more. And you can kind of see it here, a lot more watered. Notice how I'm able to put my finger through it. Like this guy. Same. Okay, time to test. Big glob of this. Oh wow, holy shit. I'm getting the feeling that this emulsifies the water a lot better. I mean, I felt like I had to add more water to this to get to that. That could be just a difference in the initial measurement, but I mean, wow. This one's so smooth. This one not as much, but I guess it's more or less water. This now feels wetter. And this one feels the same consistency, but it feels richer than this one. I do believe I nailed the consistency of the wetness. So if you take a look here, dry my hands here a little bit. Take a look at here. It's hard for my phone to capture this crap. It should. Okay? Ignore that hair. It's fine, it's just a little cloth. So that's icing only. Amazing. Here we got cake and icing. For fuck's sake. Again, I feel this feels less wet because it's emulsifying better, and as a result, it feels smoother and more luxurious with more water added. This, surprisingly, not as much. So here is the final pipe product. We got, keep in mind that this is the cake and icing shortening. This is, this is the icing. I want to say that obviously it may not seem like the most fair comparison because I had to add water, but that's because I was testing out how come this cake and icing one wasn't coming out as luxurious as the icing one. So clearly you can see a magnificent difference between the two. They were made essentially exactly the same, and the only difference is this had more water added to it. Which is why it's kind of not holding the shape of the rose as good. But remember, I'm looking at how much it can maintain the shape. So this does seem significantly smoother, this one. I'm gonna include images, obviously, than this one. But I'm gonna go ahead and chalk that down to the water. I would say if they looked if they both looked equally smooth, what would the stability be? So I set this oven to 100. That's right, 100. Just to simulate a very hot summer condition. And then I didn't add any humidity to it. I could, but theoretically I'm assuming if we know about the temperature, humidity wouldn't play that much of a factor. Though, speaking, the icing only should hold up better in more humidity as well. For what it's worth, I don't believe the cake and icing shortening is the way to go if you really care about the quality of your icings. It comes at a premium, but you could pass that premium on to the customer, in my opinion. So now, into the oven they go. I cleaned up the camera a little bit, guys. I'm just trying to make sure I captured it accurately. Again, the icing only one. Okay. Icing only. Cake and icing. Again, I really do think adding the water made it not as pretty looking. And you can see it's already kind of not holding its shape, so it is definitely a little too moist. But it was only because I was trying to match the mouthfeel of this, which I just couldn't. No matter how much I hydrated this still, even looking this way, you would think, okay, this is stiffer, right? But it feels more smooth, velvety than this one. So these have been a 97.6. We're gonna see what each looks like. So that is the icing only. Seems to be doing pretty well under the pressure. Looks almost identical. I mean, I can't see, ignore those black dots, but I can't really see any differences, even the petals. And even standard Sweetex cake and icing is holding up. I'd say pretty decently. It's kind of hard, but I'm looking at the fine lines, and so nothing really changed here. So now, this was 30 minutes at 98. We're gonna crank this bad boy to 115. I know. And what this is gonna simulate is an exceptionally hot day where some crazy people are like, let's go have a party and get skin cancer. We're gonna run that for 30 minutes once it reaches the temperature. Guys, this was literally 15 minutes at 116. Both of them are pretty melted. But we see some interesting stuff here. More liquidy. This one is less liquidy. I will say, unfortunately, I didn't get the 15-minute time lapse here. But even the melted product on this seems way better. Notice how watery this is. And then notice here, a lot more thick and unctuous. So neither of these particularly handle. Oh, they're 128. So these are almost 10 degrees hotter than what the oven was set to. So that means that sous vide of 85 or 86 was actually 96. However, it does seem like, unlike this one handled a lot more heat more. So, what's the consensus? Obviously, if you really care about the quality of your icing, you want to get the fine icing one. You do not want to get this one. See that? And see this? Notice there's some of the sugar, but for the most part, the shortening at the bottom is a lot more settled and solid than this one. So if you are thinking of extremely hot conditions, Sweetex, this ratio one, will 100% withstand a lot more. So the fact that we have, here, let's dump this guy. That much shortening still intact, okay? Intact. Versus cake and ratio shortening. I mean, this is pretty descriptive. I mean, I could measure this, okay? But if we look at this plate and that plate, it's obvious one holds up a lot better to heat, as high as 127. So what does it mean? Cake and icing or finest high ratio icing? Which one do I want? All right, so here's the reality, guys. Let me sit down for this. The reality is, if you value, well, if you want to do cake and icing, this is your only option. But one thing is very clear: the finest high ratio icing is superior. No question in my mind. If you care about toppings and frostings and mouthfeel and unctuousness, and moreover, it holding up a lot better in extreme heat conditions, it would be Sweetex. We're talking like summer in Georgia with some humidity. This is going to be what you want, especially if you have an outdoor event and you're a business. You don't want to risk crap melting on you. I mean, it's inevitable that they melt, as you saw in the videos, where I accidentally left it at 127 degrees Fahrenheit for like an hour. And apparently, the 97 degree sous vide mode, you actually have to add 10 to it. So that was 107. Now, it does seem like the melting point of this one is bolstered by polysorbate by about 10 degrees, but those 10 degrees can make or break the difference in terms of holding shape, holding details. Now, this cake and icing shortening, what is this good for? Well, it's in the first of the word, the cake. You apparently cannot use this one. I'm guessing it's because the polysorbate 80 emulsifies things more and holds on to more moisture, so it's not as good for baking applications where you need the moisture to escape, right? To raise your cakes, especially with baking powder and baking soda. Now, I'm not an extreme baker. My you know my usage for these was primarily icing on professional products. So this is 106275 is my guy. But if I was doing cakes and things like that, there is no other option. You use this one. But if you really think, okay, is it a day and night difference for the icing? I would say no. You could get away with this, but you cannot use this under high heat conditions. And also keep in mind, it's not going to be as nice as this to work with. So if you really care about your frostings and all that, and you really want like the best workability, you're probably going to want the high icing shortening made for icing. But this one is fine. It works fine. In terms of smoothness, I do think you can get the same level of smoothness. It's just the mouthfeel on this is a little worse than that one. All right, guys, I hope this video helped. And I'm probably going to put this on my tech channel. But you know what? This is, let's consider it the technology of icing, right? I mean, look what it says right here, made with Golden Flex technology. So take care, guys.